Hello, it is Tara Boothby, Sojourn Psychology, and I wanted to just share some of my personal contemplation. I've had a few pieces come together for me over the past week that I really enjoyed experiencing in this moment and also reflecting back on my past. So I was very inspired this week by one of my friends, colleagues, mentors, a man named Brad Jersak, Dr. Bradley Jersak, who is the president of St. Stephen's University, as well as just a super cool theologian, author. He had many great books. If you're interested by the end of this vlog, I will highly recommend his book, Incarnation and Inclusion, by Bradley Jersak. So really what I want to talk about. So Brad just recently, he posted this picture of the prodigal son. And when I looked at Brad's image of the prodigal son here, I really thought to myself about an image that I carried in my office for a really long time, which is also an image of the prodigal son. And this one is by Rembrandt. This image was encouraged to me by one of my pastor friends, Pastor Dan Harstead, who was just one of the most beautiful pastoral helpers I've ever met in my life. And he was one of those people that you could sit with and feel very known very quickly. Didn't matter that he was a pastor. He was a beautiful human being who cared about other people and could see the beauty in their humanity. When I saw Brad's image posted on social media, and I just deeply connected with this story of the lineage of Rembrandt's painting in my life. And once Pastor Dan Harstead had showed it to me, he had it in his office at Fort Sask Alliance Church. I printed off a colored copy, and had it up in my office for years. This beautiful image of the prodigal son, and really sitting in this place of contemplation of what was constructed in my religious views and what was not deconstructed. But that image to me means so much about the things that I didn't know I already knew. And that's really this place that I'm going to land in this conversation today, is those things that I knew, but I didn't know that I knew. And there's a lineage in that. That's a beautiful point of contemplation. If you want to write down a note to yourself, something to think about is to pray through or breathe through, what are the things I've known in my story, but I didn't know I knew them at the time. And when I would look at this image of this prodigal son, so the story is that this boy goes to his dad, asks for his inheritance. Dad gives him his inheritance. He goes off into the world. He squanders it. He comes back. Dad embraces him. He sees him coming in the distance, and he's like, there's my boy. Let's have a feast. And the older brother is jealous and has all these like angry noticings of this prodigal son returning. There's very serious spiritual Christian implications. There's very serious Christian teachings about who God is, but identifying with this story of how we go off into our own desire, and into our own misconstrued thoughts, our negative thoughts, our irrational thoughts, our critical flaws, our bad habits, all of that psychological behavior and thought and feeling distortion that gets us into therapy. So the prodigal son was with me for seasons of my young adult life and my middle adult life. I'm still in the middle, I hope. Don't age me. Where, if we're honest with ourselves, don't we all have a story where we've gone off into our own irrational ways of being and have departed from an attachment perspective, just from love? And this awareness, when Brad posted the image of the prodigal son, and I touched my own story with Rembrandt's painting. So it's more about the painting to me, Rembrandt's painting of the prodigal son and who I was as a person, even though I was a psychologist when that image was in my office. And here I am looking back on that young woman, knowing things that she didn't know she knew about love, about inclusive love, about nonviolence, about social justice, about all of the parts of who I am being included in this grander mass of love. And I knew it, but I didn't know it. Now, what's interesting, when I saw this image that Brad posted, and I sort of fell into this place of contemplation, I'm driving to work, listening to my 2024 playlist. Little tip, it's kind of fun to make a year playlist. I just discovered this habit. I'm digging it. So I'm listening to my 2024 playlist, and there's an old song by Switchfoot on there called 24 Hours. And one of the lines is like, I'm not who I was 24 hours ago. And it just goes on to tell the story of the singer's reflection of all of the parts of who I've been and how I'm so different right now. Meanwhile, I'm studying Dante's Divine Commedia, and I'm in Purgatorio right now in the literature, and reading this amazing book. Actually, I have it right here, Paul Pearson's Spiritual Direction and Dante. And so much of Dante's reflection on this spiritual place in between our inferno. And as a psychologist, I think we live in a lot of inferno, and the spiritual transition into our paradiso is this state of purgatory where we're working through our irrational spots, our unresolved emotional, cognitive, and behavioral parts of self. And really, in this beautiful, very hard for an English speaking person in the 21st century to understand of Dante's, I'm like, wow, like so much of life is this always returning. As Rembrandt's painting taught me, that I'm always in a state of returning back to hope and grace and love. And you don't have to share the same faith base as me or to even think of it spiritually. But so much of our psychological purpose and growth, so much of our spiritual direction and spiritual formation is this always returning, always returning. And from a spiritual perspective, we can look at many beautiful examples of a higher power, of a God, of a Jesus, who taught us about returning in their own reflection of returning. So it's a pretty powerful little piece that I wanted to put out there. And really my contemplative homework for you is, if you could get still and quiet and breathe through this thought of what are the things you knew before you realized that you knew them. Go through your timeline, give yourself some credit, see that you had a hopefulness that you may not have always acknowledged. It's easy to check out our record of wrong because we all have one. I have mine and you have yours. So we can look back. I can look back and be like, oh, why did I do that? That's the easy part. Looking back and holding space for that journey of, I'm not who I was 24 hours ago. But that girl went to a meeting and connected with a man who taught her something about how to fall in love with an image. And that beautiful person is still a part of who I am. And that person is inside of you who knew something that you didn't know that you knew. So that's where I'm at. I thought it was pretty cool. I'm into this like psychology, philosophy, theology space, and I'm digging it. So again, Brad Jersak, he's a cool dude. He's interesting, especially if you're into philosophy, theology, psychology stuff. I think you'll dig Brad. He's a nice guy. He's got some really good books. Some of them are really smart, like way above my pay grade in different ways. So peace and love. I am glad you're here. And I'm really happy to share something about me, hoping that it will reach inside into something about you and that we can be in a moment together.